All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much, and thanks all for having me. My name is Dave Trier. I'm the VP of Product with ModelOps. I'm joined here by an esteemed set of panelists with a lot of industry experience, real practitioners, to talk about a really fun topic and near and dear to my heart, which is how we can use AI as a competitive source of advantage for you as enterprises overall. So first, let me go ahead and allow those that are here to introduce themselves. I'll ask Sid, if you want to introduce yourself, get a little bit of background on your role and area of focus.
Sure. Thank you, Dave. Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this very interesting panel. My name is Sid Mehrotra. I run the data science and analytics program for City Velocity. I think I hear an echo. I'm not sure where it's coming from. All right, seems a little better. All right, so I run the data science and analytics program for City Velocity, which is the digital arm of City's institutional client group. So essentially, it's a website that institutional clients of City use to consume a lot of market intelligence that City has to offer. In my role, I run the data science and technology team within it that focuses on generating insights around what's happening on the platform, who's reading what are the market moving events going on, and essentially driving both real-time insights and sort of long-term insights out of that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll turn to Richa. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me here as well. I lead a team of machine learning engineers at Vanguard, and I sit in a department called Center for Analytics and Insight, and it is our center of excellence for AI and ML within Vanguard. And my role is primarily focused on working with the data scientists and helping deploying our solutions to integrate with the business and power their decision making through AI and ML. My team focuses on the business problem solving as well as they have a huge component of technology and how do we further our machine learning platform, what are the new and innovative technology solutions we need to bring in. And in addition to that, this year we've also started our framework on ModelOps and Feature Store, and we're working at an enterprise level to standardize some of those best practices across the company. So that's also something that I'm heavily involved with.
Awesome. Great to hear, Richa. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more. Jacob, I'll let you introduce yourself next.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. I actually cannot hear or see any others due to some technology issues, but my name is Jacob Kossoff. I've been the head of model risk management at Regions Bank for the past 7.5 years. For those that want to connect with me more after this, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. Happy to have a one-on-one conversation with you on AI and AI risk. Thanks, Dave.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacob. Yeah, we'll play a little bit of Telegram in the background due to the technical difficulties. And last but not least, Agus, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity, Dave. Agus Sujanto. I'm the head of corporate model risk for Wells Fargo. So I beat Jacob in terms of tenure by about a year, right? Jacob is 7.5. I'm 8.5 years. So among the longest tenure for a job that usually only lasts for 3 years. So I responsible for end-to-end model in Wells Fargo, their oversight and any model from inception to retirement. I have the oversight of that, including the oversight of 7 model development center of excellence in Wells Fargo.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Agus. And as hopefully the audience can see of the years of experience and wealth of knowledge. So we hope to share some of their best practices as we go throughout this webinar. So again, thanks for the panelists for joining. I first wanted to start, if we can, just diving right into is clearly everyone on the panel and in the audience have just seen the massive buzz around artificial intelligence with examples around how AI is driving transformational business benefit to the organization. So maybe I could just start with Sid, just talk a little bit about how you see how you're experiencing potentially AI driving that competitive advantage for your organization. Maybe give an example of an initiative that you see has been particularly beneficial.
Sure, yeah. I think at least in sort of the capacity that I work in, what I've seen in the last couple of years, well, especially with COVID, you have seen like everything fast forward in terms of digital, like 5-10 years in a year, right? And what is happening as a result of that is you have massive amounts of data now to sort of derive insights out of, right? And in bigger firms like Citi, the value really comes out of how sort of easily accessible or broadly accessible those insights can be. So what I've seen is really like competitive advantage comes where sort of understanding of the data or mining of the data or access to those insights can sort of be made broadly available, or almost like things that you would think about as reporting in the older times as being like available on the tip of a finger tip to everybody. Kind of similar, I think. AI models, the insights that come out of them are sort of becoming like that, where depending of my job function, I will interpret it differently, I would use it differently, and I would want to make it available differently. So I'll say, at least based on what I see, I'd say like accessibility and sort of openness is one of the key factors in terms of bringing competitive advantage, because a lot of times like doing it in a more of a narrow focus and having a small set of experts sort of understanding it might not be the way to go. So bringing it like alternate data sets and then deriving insights out of those and making those insights available broadly, I'd say is one of the ways.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sid. There's a lot to unpack there. Really appreciate that. I might just get another perspective, maybe a Goose, talk about a particular AI initiative that you've seen, or whether within Wells Fargo or in the industry that you've seen really helping to drive that competitive advantage that everybody is talking about in the news. But maybe give an example for your peers.
Well, the financial institution model for financial institution is not something new, right? So I think it's something that we have been doing all the time, and in the financial institution is somewhat competing with models. I give an example, right? The area that is very, very, very clear, okay, in the traditionally used model. Credit underwriting, credit scoring, or fraud, right? It's it's competition of model, because if your model not as good as your competitor,
Right,
it will have adverse selection. If your fraud model is not the best, you're going to be target of fraud, not your peer. If your credit underwriting is not as good, you're going to scrape the bottom. You get the last thing. So we always competing with model all the time. It's not something that is new to us. Now what's new is really a lot more in terms of productivity. Area that can be area that traditionally not model, but now we can do model. We can use model, and we can do a lot more, and we can do a lot bigger volume. For example, or a better job. For example, a lot of things that use natural language processing to surveil or to monitor conduct, our people conduct, to help to route customer call or customer complaint very, very quickly to people, to different group that is can handle the complaint better. So that's a few examples, Dave.
Oh, that's fantastic. And maybe I'll turn, Jacob, can you hear me first?
Yes, I can.
Oh, awesome. Welcome to the audio show.
I followed a Goose's advice. I switched to my personal device. I was able to access through my personal phone.
Even better. Awesome. Well, thank you. Welcome. So maybe I could just take that and turn to you, Jacob. All of the examples that a Goose mentioned, I was just curious about how as you heard in Stu's talk earlier, how are you seeing, whether within your organization or others, visibility into all those different AI efforts across the organization, right? Because let's be honest, you're only kind of one team, and right, and there's all kinds of efforts going in different groups, different business units, trying to harness some of those advantages that Sid and Agus talked about. So maybe you can give us a little bit of insight of how you just get visibility and a little bit of understanding of where those are actually running, those AI models are running, and how that works.
Right. So yeah, the visibility is crucial. So it takes a lot of partnership and risk management. I'd say our most important partner is our third-party risk management, often called vendor risk management. They have really been on the forefront of as any third-party relationship starts or any third-party relationship goes through an annual review. They say, are you using anything math, analytics, AI, big data? It's like they took the word modeling and used the thesaurus. and they send it to us, right? And whether we get involved in early parts of the conversation before the models are purchased or before the solution is purchased. And sometimes in some of these larger cybersecurity initiatives, the modeling is a small part, but we get involved with those conversations early. So that helps us be aware of the landscape. So third-party risk, relatedly, procurement helps us. We work closely with legal on legal contracts. So if we split AI uses in terms of those in-house built at our firm and those from the vendor side. On the vendor side, getting involved early before the decision's made. As you do well in those, then the line of business, not because they have to, but because they want to, engage you as a trusted advisor. And they say, hey, this firm is selling this financial crime model or this credit underwriting model, and they say it does this and this and this. Do you think so? And then you can help them kind of be that trusted advisor during those conversations. So when the vendor says, I have an automated valuation model, it works really well, then you're in the meetings with them and say, okay, well, does your training data set have rural houses on it? And the AVM seller says, oh, no, it doesn't. So then the line of business, retail, can say, oh, well, that gets in the way of our strategy of automating underwriting. So I think those partners around the bank help, but model risk has to do well in front of those partners. So you go from being just compliance check to a trusted advisor when you're bringing in the AI. Now, for internally built models, there again, you partner with each of the lines of business. For those that are going to start building their own, helping steer them either through policy or through guidance to maybe rely on a larger team, a center of excellence, and maybe just have a handful, a half a dozen or less center of excellence teams that are allowed to build machine learning models and allowed to build advanced models. If it goes a little too broad, you're going to have issues with key person dependencies, issues with skills, issues with maintenance, issues just with knowing best practices. We met with one group and we said, is all the code in Bitbucket, a Git environment? They said, what's Bitbucket? We said, okay, this is going to be a problem. So I think on the in-houses, where possible, continue to provide that guidance, almost like a license, if you will, to build a model. So I'd say those are some of the partnerships, third-party risk on the one hand, and then the lines of business on the other hand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it just, for me, I've seen just over the years that collaboration across all the different groups is absolutely crucial in order to get any benefit out of these investments that you're making from an AI perspective. So couldn't agree more. Reach, I might turn to you just to talk about, well, we already got into it, but some of the challenges and gaps that you've discovered in your journey within your organization, particularly around as you're looking to productionize and operate those models. Maybe just some of the recommendations that you might give some of your fellow peers on this call.
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that Sid, Agus, and Jacob said, a lot of it resonates with what I do as well, the models that we are creating, but the onus falls on my team to be able to create those production-ready pipelines. And we definitely have seen that the MLOps world, where you're operationalizing the ML models, is a little bit in its infancy stages. And I will divide the problem into three major portions. One is the lack of process, lack of technology, and lack of the right set of people. So I'll start with the process. So the whole framework of MLOps, how do you bring about maturity in the assembly line production of the model, all the way from the ingestion of the data to creation of the features to model and output? How are you making sure it's all automated? How do you make sure that it's quality controlled, the right set of monitoring, right sort of alerts put in place, a lot of it does not exist. A lot of it is left to the judgment of people to be able to put into place. So the whole framework and the process around what does it mean to productionalize something? What is the true definition of done along the way is missing. And like I mentioned, that there is no one single source of truth. So Vanguard and other companies have embarked on the journey of model governance, risk that Jacob was talking about, and how do we have this enterprise visibility into how people are creating the models? What are they defining the features? How are they standardizing the algorithms and review, etc. is happening? So that's the process component of it. Then there is a people component. So traditionally, we had data engineers and data scientists, and then it involved the novel concept of ML engineers. Now we are thinking towards, hey, we have already had DevOps engineers who are creating the infrastructure, the machine learning platform, where the data scientists and engineers were creating models. But to deploy it using CI/CD fashion, to bring your data using CI/CD fashion, that's a whole another ballgame. How do you modularize your code? How do you make your code reusable? How do you publish your code into packages so that it is easy for people to be able to use it? That takes a whole lot of skill set. That takes a hybrid of not just understanding technology, but also understanding the data science, the engineering, the optimization, the cloud. So there's a lot, and this unicorn, there are very, very few people who exist. So we have to upskill a lot of folks from within to be able to create this solid team that's going to be able to operationalize. Last but not the least, on the technology front as well. So in my role, we've had to bring in a lot of vendors, third-party tools, evaluating feature store, for example, or workflow management, or how do we monitor or deploy. So what we are trying to create is an ecosystem which is a polyglot environment, because the need that I have to create a model is very different from some other team like Jacob was talking about, or the complexity of the model is very different. So we need to be able to make sure we are not confining people into one set of technology, giving everybody the freedom. However, when you go and deploy it, there needs to be a convergence point. That needs to be an architectural decision that the architects, the product owners need to take into account to make sure that they are setting the process not for a year down the line, but for many, many years down the line. So when we've evaluated, is there a technology solution that gives you everything from the inception of a project till the deployment? The answer is a no. There might be some, but it's very hard to customize. So this space is also evolving. And we're an AWS shop, so we need a feature store, and AWS says in last statement, hey, I have a feature store. And it's very easy for people to say it's a managed service, let's get on it, let's get it. But does it have the level of maturity? Can we evaluate it to other vendors that are out there? Should we build in-house? So build versus buy is also a big problem. So we see a lot of these obstacles. And last but not least, I would say one of the biggest hurdles that I've had to cross since I started at Vanguard 4 years ago to now is the business adoption. For business adoption is that I can produce hundreds of beautiful models all day long. But if business A does not have the mindset to integrate, or B does not have the means or IT know how to integrate, all is lost. So it's also that the companies need to be able to adopt it. And in your previous question about the competitive edge, I think the biggest competitive edge somebody can bring in is they really make analytics as part of their business decision making. So those are some of the problems that I grapple with every single day. Those are some of the challenges and fun things that I do on a day basis in my job.
Richa, that was absolutely amazing, and it was really music to my ears because my background is in analytics, but also in process. And one of the biggest challenges that I've seen, as I was just mentioning to Jacob, is just how do you pull together all those different teams in a cohesive and streamlined and automated process. Now, obviously, from our experience, we call that a model life cycle, and helping to get a concrete definition of what those processes would look like, because they're going to be slightly different depending on whether it's internally developed, vendor model, cloud-based, on-prem. It doesn't matter. They're going to be different. So I 100% agree with you. It's having that concrete definition of that process and looking to automate where you can. But the challenge, as you rightfully pointed out, is how do you leave that innovation freedom, right? How do you leave it to develop, say, in R tomorrow and Python today, right? How do you leave it to develop with cloud vendors? So it's a real challenge that we've seen a lot of our customers grapple with. So thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I was just curious, Jacob, you kind of were nodding your head there around what kind of tooling have you seen to be helpful to address some of these challenges, especially if you think about operationalizing, connecting the different groups, and managing those models out there in production?
Right. So that's a great question. For us, the more the leadership team gets together and say, okay, what direction are we trying to go? So we think about upskilling. All right. So say you're going from SAS to Python. All right. Does everybody have to learn Python in a month, in 6 months, in a year? What are they going to? Are they going to go, when they're in Python? And then from there, what else do they need to learn? And so by kind of stepping back to saying not everyone needs to be a data scientist, right? We have some data engineers, some machine learning engineers, some machine learning, operations specialists, some people that are more on the data visualization, some that are more on the data prep. So when we first said, okay, well, we're going to upskill everybody and everyone's going to become a data scientist. Well, that can be a recipe for disaster. Some people don't want to, some people don't have the skills. And then sometimes you can actually have the problem, which it doesn't sound likely, but it unfortunately can be likely, is you end up upskilling people and then there's not enough models for them to work on. You say, okay, I learned machine learning models. They say, oh, I just want you to go back to, traditional SAS loss forecasting models. Oh, when can I use some new skills I have? Oh, okay, well, that'll be in a year from now. So there's also the risk of are you upskilling at the right pace? So in terms of the conversation on making sure you're moving at the right pace, you don't want to be in a spot where you're going so fast, or even with vendors, you're saying, okay, let's use Domino, now let's use CDSW, now let's use this firm and this firm, that associates can get pretty exacerbated by feeling that they're learning a new language, and then they're learning a new language, and they're learning a new platform, and they're trying to keep up with the top 50 analysts at the bank or top 50 data scientists, and they can get pretty disengaged. So making sure that you're moving at a healthy pace, but you're not moving forward just for the fun of it, and that you're not moving that as a pet project for the 10 most advanced data scientists at the bank that nobody else can keep up with. And so you don't run into key person dependencies. But to the other points from Agus and Sid and Risha, is that you are modernizing, you are using AI, but in a way that is the right pace for you, so you ultimately are getting value out of it without creating key person dependency.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jacob. There's almost a point of making sure that you're not just doing this just to use new technology. That technology needs to actually have that differentiated, as Goose talked about, to be better than the prior version, and it needs to be something that can be implemented today, not a science project for 5 years out. So great points. I'd like to turn to a Goose. I know we're about 5 minutes left. Hopefully you all saw that video on the keynote presentation about the different roles. Pretty funny. I recommend you check them out after this. But Agus, I just wanted to get your perspective on, is there a particular organizational structure that you've seen work to ensure that all AI models are governed and operated properly? Who leads AI, and where does it fit in the organization? How do we make sure that any of that is actually properly managed and governed? Your thoughts on that? You're on mute, Agus.
Thank you. Sorry for that. I would like to thank you for the question. I would like to probably make a key distinction between discovery and exploration and putting model to production, right? Discovery and exploration, that's everybody. Everybody can do it. Everybody need to do it in terms of discovery and exploration. But when it's times to put model into production, we start getting more serious. Now we're going to put model into production. I wanna make an analogy of this. We want to drive very, very fast car. And we want to drive very fast car, like Formula One. You need expert driver. And you need to have very well engineered car. And then you need to have expert crew. Then when the car needs to make a pit stop, we can do it really, really fast. So right. Safety and soundness here is so critical when we putting model into production. So who are the expert driver? We cannot put any citizen data scientist to put model into production. that's just a recipe of disaster, because we're thinking about what is the risk, what's the implication of model when the model is wrong, what kind of harm that model can create to the institution and to the customer. So that's when we say, okay, who are the expert driver, so that we can drive, we can deploy really fast. For us in Wells Fargo, that's a center of excellence on model development. We have 7 of them. They are the approved people. They are the only group that can develop and model and deploy model into production. Everybody else can explore and that. And then we have the well-engineered car. This is where those models need to be developed and deployed in a very, very well-controlled platform. And then we have expert crew. This is the model validator, the people that do model monitoring, the legal and compliance people who can be really to say yay and nay and making final decision on the model that may have disparate impact or discrimination. So those kind of things that we're thinking about when we're thinking about organization.
That was awesome, Agus. I'm hoping they recorded that because I love the analogy.
I love Agus's point about the model risk is the kind of the pit crew. Who's checking the brakes? If you're going to drive really fast, you got to make sure the brakes work. And so that's where model risk. They obviously check a lot of things, make sure the speedometer's working and everything. But that leads to the follow-up question I always have is, well, who designs the race course?
Your customers, right? Okay, we got one last question, and this one actually is for Sid, if you don't mind. Just curious to kind of extend upon what Agus mentioned there. You don't have to take the race car analogy, but in your experience, where does IT fit in this? How do they become that partner to help you get your race car going in the right direction and smoothly? What's your experience on that, Sid?
Yeah, what I'd say is like IT's role is kind of omnipresent, and they're sort of the tools that are facilitating. They're building the tools that are facilitating all of it, right? So to take Agus's analogy forward, the pit crew, whatever tools they're using to manage or monitor or check the status of models, those tools would require IT support and IT's involvement to be built, right? So the way I see the role of IT within AI projects is more like a role where wherever you want to build a scalable, productionizable tool set or product, you will have some level of involvement from IT, who are sort of the experts in this. And then it sort of extends to like kind of everything else that Jacob and Risha were mentioning as well, where if you're talking about CI/CD pipeline or the DevOps, like there are guys who have been doing this for a while, and a lot of it can be taken from the application development side of things, and sort of the skill sets can be reused.
I want to build on Sid's point there about,
please.
When we were trying to teach some data scientists about APIs and learning about OpenShift, learning about MuleSoft and Bamboo and containers, it was just over their head. And we were kind of doing it wrong and saying, nope, to be a good data scientist, you have to understand Kubernetes, you have to understand containers, you have to understand, Bamboo and MuleSoft. And we said, no, we're going to separate that to the points of the other panelists and say, no, we're going to have ModelOps engineers. We're going to have machine learning engineers. We're going to have data platform engineers, and they can handle that spot, and they can be the experts. And so, okay, you can still build a model even if you've never heard of MuleSoft or OpenShift or containers or anything.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's exactly as Agus was talking about. You have your expert crew, and there could be experts at different things, but combined, they help to support and get that model into production faster, so you can actually get business value out of it. So, absolutely, I love the analogy.
Call them T-shaped people, and it's like an IT jargon to call them T-shaped people. Like you have like a width in which you specialize in across the board, but there's a certain skill set that you go deep in.
Not everyone has to be well-rounded. We can have pointy people also.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, well, thank you all so much. I know we're out of time, and I'm sure that there's a lot more that we could talk about, but I really appreciate your perspective. Thank you to the panelists, and I'm sure that if those in the audience have questions, that the panel will be more than happy to answer them offline. But thank you again, and I'll turn it back to you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.